Thanks for joining me on this webinar today. I'm going to be talking about the 24 must-haves for your website in 2024. Very quick introduction to myself. My name is Will. I'm the founder and managing director here at WebBox, a digital agency that I founded 15 years ago, which specialises in web development and performance marketing. Over that time, I've had the privilege of working with organisations such as Fevertree, NHS, Welsh Rugby Union, St John Ambulance and DS Smith to help them define their requirements and to deliver website and performance marketing campaigns. Now, over that 15 years, I've seen a lot of changes in the industry. So I've gathered my experience and the insights from running these campaigns and web projects. And it's really that which is infusing the insights for today's talk. Now, just before we begin, I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping points. So we are recording this session, and I'm just going to click the record button now so that we've got that. There we go. So it is being recorded today so that a copy can be sent to you shortly. Also, just to note that I'm going to cover quite a lot within this session, so forgive me if I'm not going through each point in detail, but if you want to kind of deep dive into any points afterwards, then that's fine. Please let me know. And then finally, please join the conversation online. I'd love to get your feedback, so you can tag us on any social channel at WebBox Digital. Now, as we start this session, you'll be aware that there's 24 points that I've got to get through. So I'm going to move quickly, but I've split them into 6 areas. So I'm going to give you 6 points on design, 6 on content, 6 on marketing, and 6 on the experience of your website. And I think that's a good way to split it up so that you understand different aspects of your website and what you might need to work on as we get into 2024. So without further ado, let's make a start. We're going to get into the first of the 4 sections, and that is design. So the first point is user-focused design. Now, as user expectations become increasingly demanding, web designers will begin to focus more on user experience design. This will involve creating sites that are intuitive and easy to navigate for all users, regardless of their level of technical expertise. Now, we can expect to see an emergence of new trends, such as voice-activated navigation, AI-powered personalization, and interactive elements that make the user's experience more enjoyable. And that's just a little bit of a flavor of some of the features that I'm going to deep dive into later on. So let's move on to our second must-have, and this is mobile-first design. Now, no one should be surprised by this point, nor, in fact, is it new. However, it's more important now than ever. So if you're in the process of designing a new website, or maybe having your current website completely redesigned, then consider taking a mobile-first design approach. Now, it's clear that mobile design is more important than desktop, with over 60% of all internet users accessing websites on their mobile device rather than a desktop. So therefore, it's needless to say that a thumb-friendly mobile design is now simply essential. Your website needs to be intuitive and easy to navigate with a thumb alone. And simplicity is the key here. So you can see on screen, there's an image of where most people's thumbs can reach, depending on which hand they hold their phone in. And this should give you an indication as to where the majority of your content should sit within the design, and more importantly, where your call to actions should be. Now, as we know, Google is a mobile-first index. So therefore, taking a mobile-first approach with the design of your website is now really important for your rankings. Now, I'd just leave at this point by saying this isn't for everyone. So there are some organizations which won't feel comfortable with taking this approach because your agency might submit you designs of what the website would look like on a mobile device only, and you might not, by that, get the full picture of what your website's going to look like on a desktop. So just consider whether this approach is right for you or not if you're in the process of redesigning your website. Now, the third must-have is micro interactions and animated cursors. Now, I've got an example on screen. So on the left-hand side, you can see an example of a micro interaction. This is where someone's trying to click a button and it actually says to you that the file is downloading in the background and it notifies you when that's ready. And the second example on the right is where you can see a really large navigation across the screen of this website. And as the user hovers over each link, an image appears to signify what that area of the website is all about. Now, I guess this comes from our frustration of when we maybe click a button on a website and we sit there wondering whether anything is going to happen. Now, that sense of uncertainty can be taken away through the use of micro interactions and interactive cursors. So we encourage you to make use of motion UI design to boost page interactivity and also to aid user experience so that the user understands what they can click on your website. A real simple example of this would be to look at our own website, and you'll see actually the cursor changes to a play icon when you hover over a video. When that video is then playing, the icon changes to a pause icon. And it's little things like that which boost the interactivity with your web pages. Now on to our fourth must-have. Now I'm going to share two design trends with you, but as you can imagine, there are far more than just two that we could discuss today. But the key point to take away is that your website's design should be current and on trend to avoid users having a negative first impression. So let's take a look at the first design trend. Now, as you can see, this is very obviously gradients. So if you're looking to create a website from scratch or revamp your old one, you can consider adding gradient accents with white and black, or highlighting call to actions, or very vibrant color palettes to enhance the design of your website. Now, you can do this with more prominent color palettes, which is particularly on trend at the moment, as you could see from the previous screen. And the reason to do this is to really kind of engage and make sure that the user's attention is drawn to the right things on the screen. Now, the second design trend I want to share with you today is oversized text. And you'll see this across a lot of websites at the moment. So this kind of movement towards ultra minimalistic design conveys necessary information just in the first look. And again, you'll see this on the homepage of our own website. So we use oversized text to help you understand the services that we deliver in a very quick and informative way. So plain text with sans serif font styles can add to the appeal of a website. You can ultimately say more with less if you choose to display information in large, oversized text. But it also increases the responsiveness and speed of our websites because designers can keep the layout and design minimal and skip large visuals on the page. So there's a number of other benefits with that particular design trend. Now, as I say in summary, it's not per se to go headfirst into one of those design trends, but it's important that your website is on trend so that users get a really good sense of your business and a good feeling when they access your website for the first time. Now, the fifth must-have is accessibility. And I'd love a little bit of engagement here. So if you want to open up your chat window, I'm not going to ask anyone to shout out, so don't worry about that. But I'd love just to get a bit of a show of hands, really. So in the chat window, can you kind of just say yes or no if you considered accessibility during your website build? So literally just put the word yes or no into the chat window if you considered accessibility during the build. Okay, great. So most people are saying yes there. I'm really, really pleased to see that. Now, it's a little bit of a myth buster because a lot of people still feel that actually accessibility is really kind of reserved for public sector organizations. And we're on a real mission to kind of try and to kind of blow away that myth, because actually accessibility on websites is for every business to take seriously. This is very much an industry standard, and you'll start to see what looks like a person icon, which is becoming the industry standard for accessibility on most websites, so that users can click on that icon and change the contrast and font size and background colors and so on for those who might be visually impaired, as an example. Now, we always encourage our clients to follow the guidelines set out by WCAG, and it'd be worth looking those up online if you're wanting to press into this topic. Now, this is a big topic, so time doesn't allow us to go into this in more detail today, but I would really encourage you to take this point away and to think about whether your website is fully accessible or not. Now, kind of related to accessibility, but a separate feature, is my sixth must-have, and this is dark mode. So let me just show you an example of dark mode. So you can see here in this, let me just go back. You can see here in this video that the user actually gets to toggle light and dark mode. And what it does is it simply inverts the colors so that you can have a slightly different design to your website. Now, obviously, on first glance, this simply just changes, black to white and vice versa. But there's a lot of other benefits. So I've talked about accessibility. So for some people who might be visually impaired, the ability to toggle between light and dark mode is incredibly useful, especially on some content-heavy pages. But there's also research to say that actually on mobile devices, it can save battery. And on iPhone in particular, that bit of research said that actually it can save the battery life up to 30%. And obviously with mobile devices being so prominent now in the mix, this could make the difference to get those extra few conversions. Now, of course, we know dark mode started off in a lot of software and kind of mobile OSs, but it is really coming into the website scene. So it's really worthwhile thinking about whether you could include dark mode within your website. Now, there are a number of ways that you could implement this. If I just give you two for some examples. The first is, as per the video example I showed earlier, you could allow someone just to toggle this on and off. However, you could have an automated way. So you say, actually, at a point in time in the day, you're going to toggle to dark mode so that there's less strain on the user's eyes if they're reading content later in the evening. So there's a number of ways to implement this, but dark mode is a fantastic feature to add to your website if you don't have it already. And that's the first section. We're going to move into the second section now. So this is 6 must-haves relating to the content of your website. So the 7th must-have is social proof. Now, all people want is more proof to trust one site over another. And this need is an integral part of building a relationship on many levels. The website is often the first brand and customer connection location, so trust has to start there. Now, in 2024, we predict that the trend for social proof is more relevant than ever before. So therefore, we're encouraging you to add links to third-party review sites, video testimonials as opposed to textual ones, share company milestones and stats, and share the praises that you get on social media throughout your website to not just have your view of your services, but of course to have that social proof as well. Moving on to our 8th must-have is personalization using AI. Now, if we look at this video example, if I just press play on that, you can see here that the user on the left, Emma, sees a particular version of this page, but Joanna on the right sees a completely different version of that page. The text and the imagery and colors change. Now, to be clear, they're viewing the same page, but through personalization, the web page is actually being changed on a per user basis. Now, why is it important to consider personalization on your website? Well, ultimately, this comes down to understanding that not all users are the same. So they need a personalized experience. Now, thanks to analytics tools, web applications can not only determine who came to the site, but also adapt the site to a certain user experience or change the content for a particular user group. For example, the Apple site adapts the web page to how fast you scroll, which is crazy, right? But that's what they do. So if you're browsing through the website really quickly, they start to reduce the number of animations because they know that you probably know what you're looking for and you want to get to the content as quickly as possible. Now, as consumers, we want information that's relevant to us and presented in the most convenient and concise way. Websites that display personalized content generally have the highest engagement and conversion rates. Now, the technology behind this can also be used to help with what we call A/B split testing, so that you can actually split test different designs to see what works best and what doesn't. Now, I just want to leave you with a top tip. If you haven't come across a platform called Personalize before, it would be really worth having a look at this platform to see how you could potentially integrate it with your website to provide some of this personalization using AI on your site. Now we're on to the 9th, and this is a solution-first approach. So service-based, okay, great. So we've got quite a number of excellent, okay, quite a lot of service-based businesses, fantastic. Okay, so traditionally what a service-based business would do on their website is they would, of course, list the services that they offer. If I could just use WebBox as an example, for us, that would be talking about things like UX design, web development, performance marketing, and so on. The reality is what we're all coming to realize, and through more data, we can kind of put evidence behind this, is that actually people don't buy services because they might not understand that they need that particular service. However, they've got a problem which hopefully you have a solution for. So for example, in WebBox's terms, you might not know that you need a performance marketing campaign. However, you will know that you need to increase the number of leads coming into your business. So by identifying that problem, WebBox can position itself to say, well, we have a solution for that. So this is kind of changing the mindset to move away from services and actually to think about the solutions that your business can offer. And the example here actually is Dropbox. Dropbox is a really good example of where they don't list out services they offer, but very much the solutions which they address. Okay, the 10th must-have is having a clear proposition. Now, a clear proposition is understanding what that business does in like a blink of an eye. Now, I've got a screenshot on the left-hand side here of a website homepage. And I'm sure, hopefully, that none of you could tell me that actually this business does X, Y, and Z. It's almost impossible to know because all they've got is a company name on the left and a big hero image with no text over it. It is just impossible to know unless you know of that brand already. Now, I would also just kind of challenge you to think about, could you sum up what your business does in one sentence? Now, I'm not going to put anyone on the spot today, but actually, if someone just off the street said to you, what does your business do in one sentence? Could you actually sum that up? And if not, it's worth spending time with people within your business, trying to understand that fully and actually putting it into one sentence, because that is what should appear on your website. There should be a clear proposition on your website as to what it is that you do, so that you're not left in a position where the user has to guess and read lots of content to understand what it is that you do. So we talk about this as having a killer one-liner, and I'm sure you've heard other expressions in the past, but actually if you could have a killer one-liner which you put at the top of your website, what it often does is it reduces bounce rate, so that when people land on your website initially, they understand what it is that you do and they continue browsing. So if you don't have this already, don't leave users assuming or guessing what you do. Make it really clear above the fold and have a clear proposition. Now, you might say to me, Will, this is a really obvious one. We've got this nailed. If you feel you're in that position, send your website to someone outside of the business who hasn't heard of you before, who doesn't know what you do, and ask them to tell you what the business does in a very quick amount of time. If they can't summarize that clearly, then you might need to go back and actually revisit this point. Okay, the 11th must-have is all about brand transparency. So we've seen a rise recently in UX that is centered around demonstrating a brand's ethics, showing the user how exactly products are made or how services are provided. Now, in practice, this might include labels highlighting the sustainable materials used on a product, which is obviously what you can see in the image there, or actually describing in detail how services are delivered and by who. Now, brands are beginning to realize that the first thing visitors want these days is not necessarily a call to action button shoved in their faces. Instead, there are far more conscientious users who need to know that the brand shares their values. So through clear product breakdowns, transparent labeling, or service breakdowns, it's important that your website demonstrates that your company exists both in this digital sphere, but also in the real world its products and services affect. Now, if you want to kind of deep dive into this point, I'm happy to go into it another time. But this is something which I'm a real believer in, because having that transparency about how your brand operates is very important, and it's becoming more and more important as we head into 2024. Now, the 12th must-have is interactive storytelling. And again, I'm just going to give you a quick example of actually a good example actually of how someone tells their story. So as you can see on this landing page, you scroll through a number of animations, videos, bits of text and imagery, which tell a story about that particular business. And it's a far more engaging way to do it, as opposed to just having paragraphs upon paragraphs of text on your page. Now, we all know that people care about who they're doing business with, which is actually why it's important to share our story and why you do what you do. And that can make a real difference when trying to attract business. So again, using WebBox as an example here, we can talk about the services that we provide, but actually it's probably more interesting to talk about our 15-year journey and actually how we've arrived at this point. And that's probably more engaging to most people, because we know that actually people buy people, businesses don't often buy businesses. So on the About Us section of your website, this is a great opportunity to tell people about your company's history, talk about your mission, and outline the goals for the future. And if you can do that through interactive storytelling, it is far more engaging than, of course, just through text. So make sure that you've got lots of visuals, videos, animations to engage the user. Now, at that point, you want to put something like Hotjar onto the website, which I'll talk about later today, to see actually how people engage with that story. How far down the page do they scroll before they jump out of that process? And of course, then we can learn and pivot from that data. So interactive storytelling, a really important point for any business. Okay, so on to the third section. This is 6 must-haves relating to marketing. Now we're halfway through. I hope everyone's still with me, and I'm not making anyone fall asleep. So we're halfway there, folks. We're now on to the marketing section. Okay, so this is the 15th. Sorry, this is this is the 13th must-have. This is all about technical SEO. So with the turbulent changes in store for search in general and web design, SEO itself will likely need to adapt to the changes in its ecosystem. Now, chief of these is the increased importance of snippets, knowledge cards, graphs, and PAAs, which is people also ask, within Google. Now, search engines, primarily we talk about Google there, are also looking toward more non-keyword based searches like voice. So long tail keywords and natural language will be prioritized over artificially sounding more traditional keywords most people would kind of use in a voice search, because ultimately that's how they speak as opposed to how they type. The other thing that we're seeing is the kind of move towards local content becoming more important over the coming years. Now, according to HubSpot, 46% of Google searches already look for local information. And furthermore, searches with the near me or close by modifiers have increased ninefold in the last 2 years. So with all of this in mind, the way that we approach SEO, especially from a technical perspective, will need to evolve. And it's really worth understanding the current landscape when you're setting your SEO strategy for next year. Now, the 14th must-have is, of course, landing pages. Now, no doubt you've all got landing pages on your website. And on screen now, you can see an example of the Apple Watch Ultra, which if you didn't want one before seeing the landing page, I'm sure you'll want one afterwards, because it just draws you into the product in a really engaging way. And it leaves you by the end desperately wanting the product. That said, as an Apple fan, so I'm sorry if you're not so keen. So put it simply, landing pages are a must-have. Landing pages for each motivated visitor who's clicked a call to action is critical to your conversion success. And landing pages that integrate with a CRM or marketing automation platform is even better, as you don't want to be in a position of having to manually add data to your CRM or manually nurture a prospect that's maybe downloaded an ebook. So it's important that also you're in the driving seat with these landing pages, because ultimately your website should have quite a number of landing pages. So it's important that the landing pages are managed within your CMS or maybe through a third-party platform, but you have control to create and edit them as required, because you should evolve your landing pages based on the data that you gather. So don't think of landing pages as something you've created as a one-off and then you forget about them for another day. You should be learning from the data that you gather, and these pages should have a lot of tracking in place so that you've got that data, so that you can ultimately learn, evolve and pivot those landing pages in line with what the data is saying. So never stand still. Always learn and evolve from the data that your landing pages are gathering so that you get the most out of those landing pages. Now, the 15th must-have is intelligent automation, which links quite nicely to landing pages. So automation and AI are quickly becoming increasingly sophisticated, and web designers like us are beginning to incorporate it into their designs and also to the workflows. So we should challenge ourselves to continually seek efficiencies in our processes as technology advances. Now, from a user perspective, AI will enable websites to anticipate users' needs and automatically provide them with information that they seek. This ability could include providing relevant tips and product recommendations, or automatically filling out forms. Now, if you look at the other side of the coin, from the organization's perspective, automation should remove all of the manual tasks that your team does and allow you to define and refine processes within your organization. Now, this is actually a really big topic, and the more I talk about it, the more excited I get, and I could go on for some time. So I'm gonna leave it there But suffice to say that actually, if you're looking to put more automation in place, then it'd be worth us having a conversation to understand how this could apply to your particular business, because it is varied from business to business. Now, the 16th must-have is call to actions. And you might say, gosh, Will, this is a really obvious point. Of course, my website has call to actions. But so often we come across websites where they are not clear or even just not present. Now, the screenshot is, of course, a very tongue-in-cheek example of a call to action. However, what I want to focus on for today is what we call secondary actions. So we might think of a call to action as submit a form or find us on a map or contact us through a telephone number. I guess they're more the obvious traditional call to actions, right? But the secondary actions are as important to your nurturing journey when thinking about automation. So where people might download an ebook or engage with a recording of yours online or something like that, you want to make sure that that is also considered a conversion within the kind of marketing jigsaw, so that there's a nurture journey for those people. So it's really important to consider primary and secondary call to actions on your website. Now, just as a bit of a fun exercise, maybe later on today, bring up your website on screen and then look away from the screen for 10 seconds so that your eyes can kind of focus on something else, and then look back at the screen and think about what your eyes were drawn to initially. Now, at that point, you will understand what most users are also drawn to on your website. And if that's not one of your call to actions or a clear outline of your proposition or something important, then you're going to need to address that on your website, because call to actions and your service offering and these important aspects should be the first thing users see on your page. Now, of course, we want to learn and evolve. So it's kind of tests like this, which I appreciate are very kind of homemade, but often give a good indication. But also, solid data from GA4, Hotjar, and other platforms should actually inform the decision-making process about what call to actions are working and where they should be placed on your website. Which again leads me to another point about advanced tracking. So this is our 17th must-have. Now, I need a little bit of engagement if it's okay. So in Zoom, you should still have your chat window open. So I'd love to understand if you currently use Google Analytics for tracking on your website. So if you can just give me a yes, if you use Google Analytics for tracking on your website. Okay, lots of yeses. That's really good. Okay, and not always. Interesting. Okay, good. Okay, so I also want to understand within Google Analytics 4, do you use event or e-commerce tracking within that platform? So again, just with a yes or no, do you use event or e-commerce tracking within GA4? Okay, so there's more no's at that point. Okay, interesting. Okay, another question. Let's move on. Again, just with a yes or no, if an action is triggered after a conversion is tracked. So actually give me a yes if something happens, if an action is triggered after a conversion is tracked. No, yes, no, no, yes, no. Okay, that's a mixed bag. Interesting. And just a final point, thanks for staying with me. Final point is, again, give me a yes or no if your website or marketing activity is adapted after a conversion is tracked. So does something change on your website, or does something change in your marketing campaign once a conversion is tracked? Okay, mostly no's at that point. Okay, very interesting. So I guess the trend we can take from that is, as we talked about more advanced things, there were less yeses and more no's. Right, thanks for getting involved in that. Really appreciate your participation. So advanced tracking, when we talk about that, is not just putting Google Analytics on your website and thinking that the job is done. You know, at bare minimum, you should have event tracking in place, or if it's applicable to you, e-commerce event tracking. This would obviously allow you to track how many times maybe a form is filled out, or a button is clicked, or a sale is made. Now, in addition to this, we also recommend a platform I've mentioned a few times already called Hotjar. Now, Hotjar plugs into your website and it allows you to watch videos of actually users browsing around your website. It sounds very freaky, but it records the user's screen so you can see how they navigate through and what they do with their mouse, which can help you identify some stumbling blocks. But it also provides heat maps so you can see where the user's focus is and how far down the page they scroll. Now, all that being said, for those of you that have all of this in place, you should consider how you can introduce automations and personalization off the back of this data. So, for example, if a particular conversion has been triggered, why not show a hyper-personalized ad to people within that user group? So if I use this as an e-commerce example, they've seen a pair of shoes, but they didn't buy it. Show them that pair of shoes again and give them a promo code to come back and buy it if they didn't buy on the first visit. Now, again, this is a big topic because it can be applied in a number of different ways for each organization. So I'm happy to circle back to this on a one-to-one call after this webinar, if that would be helpful to you. Now, finally, just before moving on, having all of this data at our fingertips won't be much use unless you can make sense of the data. So we recommend using something like Google Looker Studio to pull together all of this data from multiple platforms and put it into an easy to understand dashboard. That way, you're not trying to piece together lots of data from multiple platforms, and you can also remove the noise, which is the things which actually don't matter too much to you, and really focus on the important metrics. Now, a similar point is the 18th must-have, which is third-party cookies. Now, the continued demise of third-party cookies is driving an explosion of innovation across the performance marketing industry and could be one of the best things to actually happen to the sector. Now, a quarter of internet users are already are not available to advertisers who rely on third-party cookies, because actually browsers such as Safari and Firefox have already banned them. Now, this equates to more than 15.7 million people in the UK alone, and obviously worldwide is over 1.2 billion. Now, with the industry facing the loss of third-party cookie data from Google Chrome by the middle of 2024, necessity is, of course, breeding innovation. Now, to overcome this change, you should start with auditing your cookie usage on your website and ensure that you're not reliant upon third-party cookies within your website or marketing strategy. Now, this topic can get particularly technical. So for now, I'm just going to leave you with the point that I recommend that you focus on gathering first-party data and ensure that your marketing strategy does not rely on third-party cookies. But again, this is a point that we can pick up another day. Okay, so we're now on to the final section of this webinar. This is 6 must-haves relating to the experience of your website. And the first, very purposely, is all about page speed. Now, who loves a slow website? No one does, but especially Google. Now, at WebBox, we like to practice what we preach. So we've actually spent a long time ensuring that our own website is fast to load. However, there's still plenty that we could do, as this work is never ending, as I'll explain shortly. Now, we used to think that 3 seconds for a page to load was acceptable, about the same time just to take a swig of water as you've clicked on a link. However, that's not the case anymore. So page loading times has always been one of the most important conditions for a well-optimized and converting website. But actually, if you could previously get away with about 3 seconds, now we need to try way harder. The majority of users report that they'll not stay on a website if the page takes longer than 2 seconds to load. Now, it's important to understand that this is an ongoing process. So even if you got your website to 100% within the Google page speed tool, this will likely reduce over time as your website's content changes and Google moves the goalposts, of course, on a regular basis because they like to do that. So it is important to understand that this needs to be addressed on a fairly regular basis. Now, interestingly, I ran a poll on LinkedIn recently and just asked people, would they be happy to wait 3 seconds before choosing another website to visit? And most people wanted a website to load quicker, but actually the kind of the factor which came out of that survey was actually it's very much dependent upon what you're waiting for. So if this is a well-known brand and you really want that particular product, then you'd be quite happy to wait. Now, I'm sure my wife would wait a minute for Amazon to load because she's loyal to the brand and she's always on the website. But actually, if you take yourself into a different use case and you needed an emergency plumber and you were just Googling for an emergency plumber to come out to your house today, you have no real loyalty to one plumber over another. And therefore, if that website doesn't load quickly, you're highly likely to go back to the Google search page and actually just select another one. Now, obviously, these are just two basic examples, but it gives you a flavor as to actually why it is important that we address page speed. And let's not forget that page speed is also a very important ranking factor on Google. So it is worth investing the time to get this right. So a little tip to leave you with, another thing you can do this afternoon is go to the pagespeed.web.dev website, put in your website URL, and it will come back with a score of how well your website is ranking. Now, here at WebBox, we always recommend that you aim for at least 80% on both mobile and desktop. If you're not at that marker, then you really need to do some work to take it to the next level. Okay, the 20th must-have is voice user interface design. Now, you'll have seen the voice icon appear on more and more websites recently, though Google were, of course, one of the first to include it within their search engine. So with the rise of voice search and virtual assistants, VUI design will gain prominence, more and more prominence in 2024. Web designers will need to adapt their design strategies to accommodate voice interactions. Websites will include voice-controlled elements, allowing users to navigate, search, and interact using voice commands. Designers will consider natural language processing, conversational interfaces, and audio feedback to create intuitive, user-friendly voice experiences. Now, VUI design will redefine how users interact with websites, making them more accessible and convenient for a broader audience, or at least it will if you get it right. So if you'd like to introduce this on your website, why not just start off by using a voice search feature and monitor how many users make use of that feature before starting to roll it out in other areas of your website. Now, the 21st must-have is, of course, chatbots. Now, chatbots are very much like Marmite. You either love them or you hate them, but unfortunately, they're here to stay. We all know that they've been around for some time and they're gaining in popularity. But to remain competitive online, you need to make sure that your chatbots sound more like a human than they very much used to. The truth is, no one likes chatting to a machine. So the more personalized and humanized the conversation is, the better. Once you've implemented a chatbot, we recommend that you test, review the data, evolve it, and pivot, and then repeat this process over and over again. Again, it's another thing which almost is never ending. You need to come back and constantly learn and evolve based on the data that you have. So chatbots, yeah, unfortunately, they're here to stay, folks. And I'd encourage you to consider how you could implement it on your website to serve your customer base better. And the 22nd must-have for your website in 2024 is, of course, security. And again, another aspect which is so often overlooked. Now, as cyber attacks become increasingly sophisticated, web designers must focus more on creating secure websites that protect users' information. Now, this step could involve implementing two-factor authentication systems or more robust password requirements, but it could also include encrypting data or even, dare I say it, using AI to identify potential threats. This is often one of those topics that doesn't come into focus until your website has been compromised, but I'd really encourage you not to sit and wait for that to happen. Now, top tip is if you use WordPress, which is, of course, one of the most used CMSs on the market these days, then ensure that updates to that CMS and the plugins are applied every month or as regular as you possibly can. Also ensure that you've taken the relevant steps to secure WordPress, as it's not known for its out-of-the-box security, though this is, of course, getting better. So stay on top of your website security. Don't underestimate how important that is. It really is a must-have as we enter 2024. Now, the 23rd must-have for your website is full screen forms. Now, you can see an example here on the screen of a full screen form. And what happens here is when the user goes to complete a form, the actual form takes over the whole window. Now, the purpose of this is, I guess, twofold. One, it allows you to have that minimal, design trend that we talked about earlier. So from a design perspective, you can have just the form on the website to make it look elegant without lots of other distracting information. But the second benefit is, of course, the most important, which is increasing conversions. So as we know, when people see a form, they might start filling it out, but get distracted. So it's important that we only have the form in view so that their sole focus is to complete that form and for us to get that conversion. So full screen forms are a real benefit to your website if you can put them in place. And similar point, and this is actually the final must-have, is having a progressive lead form. Now, some of you might not have heard of what a progressive lead form is, so I'm going to show you an example here on screen. So this is just a really basic example, but it obviously just demonstrates the point. So when the user first visits your website, they will see the first form, which is on the left-hand side. Once they've submitted information on that form, when they come back to the website for a second time, the form changes and we then ask for additional information. Now, this can be 2 steps, but it could also be as many steps as you want, depending on how much information you need. Now, lead form is the main way in which you can connect to your potential customers at the start of your relationship. So actually encouraging visitors to fill out the lead form can be a challenge, but of course, we should see this as an opportunity to refine our websites. So I'd really encourage you to think about implementing a progressive lead form. And this can often be done through third parties, especially your CRM. So if you currently use something like HubSpot or Salesforce or similar, then often they will provide you with the functionality to simply embed on your website so that there's not any heavy lifting required from a development perspective, but you can put in this functionality so that your CRM has additional data drip fed into it as users continue to come back to your website. Now, that's the end of the 24 must-haves for your website in 2024. I just want to thank you for sticking with me. But I've just got 2 things I want to share with you as we start to wrap up. The first is at WebBox, we've got a suite of documents and resources that can help you in your day-to-day marketing role. So why not head over to our website? You can see some of the resources here on screen in terms of things like a website brief template, guidance on GA4, and many more. So head over to that link and help yourself to some of those resources, which I hope are useful to you. And then finally, as part of being on this webinar today, I'd love to extend the offer of our free digital audit. This is an opportunity for us to meet and to audit your website or PPC campaign to try and understand what it is that you're currently doing and what you could do to improve that. Now, this just starts with a short call to understand your business and objectives, and then our team take all of that away, review your data, and present it back to you in a playback session. So if you'd like to request that kind of free, no obligation audit, please feel free just to go to that link there, and I'll send it out as well on an email later today. Just so it's a bit easier to access. So finally, I just want to say a big thank you for joining me on this webinar today. I'd love any feedback after the call, but for now, just want to say thank you, and I hope this has been helpful to you as you start to plan your website and activity for 2024. Thank you.